When you're on a bike, you are 30 times more likely to get in a fatal accident on a bike than you are in a car. Unpopular opinion. You don't need a Flatfoot a bike. You just need to be willing to learn some new tricks. I've said it before and I will say it again until people stop saying this lie. Short rider tricks are not taught in the MSF course. So I think this is where this myth is coming from here in the US. In that course, they'll tell you need to flatfoot a bike because that's not part of the curriculum, but that's not part of your whole riding life. If you ever want to go to either much wider bikes like 900-pound baggers, or if you want to do some off-roading on dirt bikes or on adventure bikes, or if you even just want to get an advanced level in track days and you're 5'4" and you want to ride more than just 300 level bikes, a lot of organizations don't allow lowered bikes on tracks above intermediate level. I have several videos showing tricks how to handle taller bikes, and it really only takes about 5 minutes, I feel like, to pretty much master those techniques. Number 2, there's a whole variety of riding you can do. When I first got into motorcycles 7 years ago, all I knew existed were cruisers and sport bikes. I had no idea there's also dirt bikes. I don't know, I guess I forgot about them or something. But there's also dual sport riding, or there's also just mini bikes. There's also trikes. I consider those motorcycles too. And you can get into track riding. Or if you want to ride like motor police officers, you can get into slow speed skills. Or you can be a hooligan and get into some stunt riding. Or you can just be a commuter or go on some road trips. There's really no limit, and that's pretty cool. Some really big lessons I learned about what things are like on bikes, I learned on some of my first road trips. So riding thousands of miles on a cross-country trip to Key West, Sturgis, Tail the Dragon, I discovered a lot about myself and also the human body when it comes to riding. The wind chill on a bike. You'll notice that anyways, even on short rides. But there's a chart that I'll find and I'll put right here on the screen. At certain speeds, once you go over 50 miles per hour and over, it's almost 20 degrees colder on your bike than it actually is because of the wind chill. This is something that when I was commuting to an office in the fall and the spring, morning rides were about 20 degrees colder than the late afternoon rides. So with wind chill, almost equivalent of like 40 degrees. Granted, that doesn't mean that 80 degrees is gonna feel like 60. I think this wind chill thing applies more to an already chilly day, but it's not a perfect science. So what I would do is I'd ride to work with a heated shirt under a waterproof liner and a mesh jacket, and I'd ride home, wet my shirt in the sink before I left, and ride with that mesh jacket, letting the wind blow through. So you'll find yourself getting pretty resourceful as a motorcycle rider. But the main thing I notice is that on a road trip, when I'm riding hundreds of miles in a day, what you do to stay warm for 30 minutes may not keep you warm for 2 hours. So for instance, maybe my heated gloves were warm enough for the first 30 minutes, but after a couple hours, the layers of those gloves would get cold too. And eventually, even full blast heated gloves would not keep fingers warm. So just keep that in mind if you're doing long trips. What you do for a short ride, you may need a little bit more for all day riding. Another thing I noticed is that on your bike, a lot of times it's not what you want to do if you're on a time crunch. So putting on gear for me adds about 10 minutes. And pretty much everywhere I go, I'm running barely on time, if a little bit late. So when I'm home, I often just take my car. Where this really applies is on a long day of riding. If your GPS says it's going to take you 6 hours to get to a place, what I've realized for me, that's about 30% longer than what the GPS says. Because on your bike, wind constantly beating at you, even if you have a really good windscreen, that does help with fatigue, but still. The noise of the wind, make sure you got earplugs, and even just having your body in a certain position, it can be very exhausting. So I need to stop a lot more on my bike than I do in a car. Not just because my bike needs gas more than my car does, but because my body needs more breaks. When GPS says it's gonna take me 6 hours to get somewhere, it's really gonna take me 9 hours. And on top of that, you are much more affected to weather than you are on a bike. Maybe in a car, you may be more likely to be driving through a coastal flood warning, and maybe in a bike, you may be less likely to do that. The first time I was caught in a coastal flood warning, I just kept going. I had all the proper gear and it wasn't cold. Being warm and wet is not a terrible thing. Being cold and wet, that is miserable, and I have pulled over for that. But the longer a trip, the more likely and then the bigger kind of gap you can have for delays. So let's say if it's a 5-hour drive, maybe it's going to be 20% longer. Let's say if it's a 7-hour drive, maybe it's going to be 30% longer. And I could kind of apply that also to a long trip that I estimated was going to take me 3 to 4 weeks to go across the country and back. Considering my way back, I was going to stop at a whole bunch of places. It actually ended up taking me 6 weeks. I did not know that in the center of the US, there is Tornado Alley, which is pretty much constantly has high wind advisories, strong enough to topple semis, dust storms, going up and down mountains. You'll be at warm 60, 70 degrees on the ground, and then once you go up in elevation, within an hour, you'll be below freezing temperatures. And then within an hour, you're back to normal. So it's a whole wide variety of changes of weather you can go through when you're traversing longer distances. Number 4, how important proper gear really is. And you can do a surprising amount of damage, even if you have some gear, but if you just don't have the proper gear for what you're doing. Some people think that if you just have non-abrasion fabrics like leather, you'll be fine, but you really need that armor. A perfect example is me using my leather riding street boots on a mini dirt bike, and they weren't tall enough to protect my shin when I tried riding that mini bike up the stairs. So that's one example. The other example is road rash can happen at very low speeds. If you are even thick, jeans can shred in seconds at just around 25 miles an hour. And the whole half of your body can be exposed and skinless. So you want to make sure you have the best gear that you can get for the kind of riding that you're doing. One thing I never thought about until one of my girlfriends got in an accident is glasses. So glasses and sunglasses, I mean, that is glass near your eye. And she got in an accident and had a piece of glass lodged in her skull. So that could be your eyeball. So there are shatterproof glasses that you can get. I have a discount code down below for ones that I've worn and tested across over 8,000 miles this year so far. They're kind of perfect to fit under your helmet because those temples are so thin. They're actually made to like not break the seal in pilot headsets. So for motorcycle helmets, they work great. Who would have thought, that you could get glass in your eyeball? Something good to know. Another thing that really helps with fatigue and just staying focused on the road is having some kind of sound system while you're riding. Something that you can either listen to music, talk to friends, listen to your directions if you don't want to keep looking down at your phone. I've used Accardo for years, and this one specifically has made it with me through coastal flood warnings, high wind advisories strong enough to knock down semis, and even though it's magnetic, it still stays in place really well. I have a discount link for you down below. When I first started riding, I used to get horrible migraines after a full day of riding up in the mountains. And someone suggested for me to not only stay ultra hydrated the day of riding, but also start getting hydrated the day before. And also wearing earplugs. I wasn't doing either of those things. So once I did both of those things, my migraines went away. And some of you may have baby ear holes apparently, like I do. And the foam earplugs can really hurt. So I like the silicone earplugs better because they just don't hurt my ears after a full day of riding. Next on the list is you will get a lot of unsolicited advice. No, it's not just if you're a woman. Guys get this too. And apparently, even very skilled rider guys that I know get this too. There's no way you're a better rider than MotoJitsu or a retired motor cop that's been teaching civilians for over 20 years. But people will still offer advice. When I first started riding, my very first YouTube video was me getting my very first bike. So I was a brand new rider since the start of this YouTube channel. And I actually loved the unsolicited advice at this point because I knew so little. I just wanted all of the advice. I'm like, just give it to me. I want to know everything. But the more I've learned, the more I've ridden. But now, after riding 7 years, tens of thousands of miles of road trips, dozens of classes, which, by the way, really wasn't enough. It wasn't until I started practicing a lot on my own this year that I felt like I started getting those skills down. It wasn't until I started to recognize that a lot of that unsolicited advice is incorrect. I don't know what it is about motorcycles, but people just want to be the expert and they want everyone to think they are too. Number 6 is that it's not as easy as it looks. It actually takes a lot of technique to be able to very gracefully ride bikes at slow speed skills, or also be very accurate in curvy, high-speed roads. And especially when you start riding bikes that do require a learning curve for you. Maybe your feet are not flat on the ground. Maybe it's not intuitive to pick it up. But just know that just because you can't pick it up now doesn't mean you can't learn the technique or gain some muscle and pick it up later. That was me with the bike I have now, the Triumph Tiger 900. I couldn't pick it up when I first bought it, but after several months later, I really practiced that technique and worked on getting stronger, and now it's easy. So just know that training does not have to stop at the certification course. There are so many classes for adventure bike riding, dirt bike riding, slow speed skills with motor police officers, retired motor police officers. There's track day riding. There's even a track champ school where you learn to ride on the track with professional racers. My favorite adventure class is with Jocelyn Snow in California. No other class has this insane obstacle course like she does, where you can literally ride over cars. Next is save those certificates for your courses, because many insurance companies will give you a discount. I think it'll only apply for a year, and you usually can't layer on classes for multiple discounts, but a lot of them will accept a certificate for a course and give you a better deal. Number 8 is the importance of practice. I am a perfect example of what happens when you take dozens of classes but you don't practice. That's what I did for pretty much my first 6 years of riding. I took just about every class I could get my hands on, but I never practiced on my own. So Moto Jitsu kind of describes that as the 80-20 rule. And Jerry Palladino says, if you don't use it, you lose it. And I experienced exactly that. So I took all these classes with these professional people, and by not going home and practicing, I didn't have those skills. It was like they were gone every time I would retake a class. So this year I made it a point to practice what I've been learning. I'm up to about 10,000 U-turns right now between my bike and this police Harley I've been borrowing from Bikes and Beards. Shout out Sean. And this is the first time in 7 years of riding where I've been able to consistently hit tight circles and tight U-turns on my own, without an instructor holding my hand all day long. Now, you don't have to do 10,000 U-turns to get there. Some instructors will say just 10 to 15 minutes once a week is enough to keep those skills, because they are perishable. And I've seen that with myself. I've seen that with other riders in classes who say, well, I've been riding 25 years. And then they're one of the worst riders in the class. Practice. It's fun. And plus, look how cool you can look. Some of you will be like, what are you talking about? Everyone says this. Okay, every non-rider says this to you. Every non-rider you meet wants to tell you how their uncle's cousin's girlfriend's ex-boyfriend got in an accident and died. It's so annoying. It happens constantly. I almost don't like small talking saying that I ride because of this very reason. But what riders don't tell you that we really should remember, because by acknowledging this, it can really help a lot of riders. When you're on a bike, you are 30 times more likely to get in a fatal accident on a bike than you are in a car. The most common place for accidents to happen are not where your mom and sister are really worried about you riding. It's not the highway. It's not on your cross-country road trip. It's at intersections. Other vehicles turning left in front of a motorcyclist. That tells me that it's other vehicles not seeing us, not noticing us. Now, I'm not telling you this to scare you, but I'm telling you this so that you can have a good strategy to make sure you are not one of these statistics. I'll tell you what I've been doing, and for 7 years, I've never even had a close call. Except this year, I had 2, and it literally just happened this year. But defensive riding can make such a big difference. Just making sure you're not in anyone's blind spots. Making sure that you're positioning your bike in a way that they can see you on their side and rear view mirrors easily. Or if they make any sudden stupid lane changes, you're not going to be right there getting the brunt of it. Like for instance, this clip right here of this idiot going into the lane at an intersection, which is illegal, by the way. Sure, you can blame other people. You can say other people are stupid, other people aren't paying attention, or you can just make a better practice at putting yourself in the best position you can. So that's why I always wear bright gear, a white or red helmet, this light on the back of my helmet that flashes when you're stopping or slowing down, wire-free, but there are definitely things that you can do to keep yourself safe, even when other drivers aren't. Number 10, and don't go away right after that because I've got a bonus for you. And that's your fitness for riding. Okay, I understand not everyone likes to work out, but let me tell you something. It'll make your riding just that much more enjoyable. And if you don't want to become a gym junkie, there are very specific exercises you can do for very specific riding things. For me, the main thing I wanted to do was be able to pick up my bike. I did not want something smaller because I absolutely love my bike. It rode so beautifully, and for long highway rides in the US, I needed something that could go high speeds and had a large tank capacity. So my Triumph Tiger is the perfect bike for me. But when I first got it, I couldn't pick it up. But after doing some very specific exercises, now I can. Dr. Matthew Tolstoy, he is a rider and a doctor, and he has created Motorsport Athlete, a program he has created to very specifically give you flexibility and strength for riding. And the bonus one. The last thing I can say is I had no idea just how severely addicting riding could be. I started riding 7 years ago. It has consumed my whole life. It's literally my job now. 7 years ago, I took the MSF course just for one fun weekend to get over an ex. And I never thought I would ride again after the MSF course. But I was wrong. I was hooked, and I'm like, this is my life now. But it has been a great motivator. It's the first thing in my life that motivated me enough to work out and get strong for my bike. I never cared about that stuff. The hard part is that your family may always be very concerned for you. My family is still pretty worried about me riding all the time. Some of it is a little ridiculous, like they were very concerned about me riding from Georgia to Florida over the holidays, but some of it is a little more understandable, like they were very concerned about me on my first time riding across the country. One of their things were, they were like, it's windy, and apparently I understood. I got caught in a dust storm. So that can be difficult, especially if you have a lot of empathy for other people's feelings. You don't want to make your family scared and sad for you, but you also don't want to stop riding because it brings you so much joy. Just remember to stay safe because your family wants you alive. I want you alive because we need to become old riders. Since watching this video basically made you an intermediate rider, congratulations.